Standardized testing has been long used as a measure for academic proficiency. However, in recent years, it has been under a storm of controversy. In fact, recently, the University of California system removed the SAT and ACT from their admissions requirement, according to the Wall Street Journal on May 29, 2020. A lot of the concerns regarding standardized testing come from a perceived achievement gap. Achievement gap, specifically meaning in this case, differences in performance among people from various socioeconomic and racial backgrounds. This achievement gap has been only exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the Washington Informer on December 10th, 2020. I am here today to argue that the United States should move away from standardized testing and instead move towards one, using a variety of alternative methods in terms of testing, and two, allowing teachers more creativity and autonomy in curriculum creation. In my speech today, I'll be first going through some of the problems associated with standardized testing, then the causes, my solutions, and then my conclusion. So first on to some of the problems associated with standardized testing. There are two main ones. One is the fact that it doesn't accurately depict what students actually know or their academic abilities. In a study done by the Centers for Studies in Higher Education in March of 2020, they actually looked at first-year Berkeley students, their grades, and then their SAT and ACT scores. And what they found is that SAT scores were only 2% responsible for 2% of the variance in grades, and ACT scores were only responsible for 1% of the variance in grades, meaning that standardized tests were not accurate predictors of academic performance in students' first year of college. In fact, actually, the study found that SAT scores and ACT scores tended to be more correlated with things like socioeconomic factors like parent income or parent education level, or whether or not the student was a minority from a minority background. It just goes to show again that standardized testing does not actually give us the data that we want to see, and does not actually give us a good idea of what sort of knowledge and skills students have. Another problem associated with standardized testing is the fact that it often creates a sort of curriculum where teachers just teach to the test. According to the School Journal in fall of 2019, where they studied students in AP classes, they found that in the short term, students benefited by doing well on their AP exams. But in the long term, when they actually applied this to college courses, students who had taken an AP class were not much more likely to do well compared to students who had not taken the AP equivalent. Again, this just goes to show that sometimes standardized testing doesn't actually lead to effective, deep learning. Now that we've talked about some of the problems, let's talk about some of the causes. So there are two main causes. One is the fact that standardized testing companies like College Board have a lot of money and influence and are incentivized to push certain messages. So College Board, according to Forbes in November 30th of 2020, gains about $1 billion in revenue per year, with $100 million in an untaxed surplus. The chief executive of College Board actually makes $2 million per year. As you can tell, College Board is incentivized tremendously as a business to sort of market itself as something necessary for educators to properly assess students. And pushing this narrative, they've been effective in making us falsely believe, that we need them to create fair and equitable testing methods. A second cause of sort of the issues with standardized testing is a rhetoric that's often espoused by politicians. According to the Educational Foundations in Social Justice Education, in January 1st of 2019, politicians are often either by influence of big standardized companies or because of pressure from society to push standardized testing as a golden standard for academic achievement. And this is seen, for example, in No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was heavily dependent on standardized testing as a means to measure school and district performance. Furthermore, this leads to a lot of rhetoric convincing people that standardized testing is the only way to ensure that students do not fall behind. By pushing this narrative, again, it sort of negatively impacts society's view of how standardized testing is sort of what we should be aiming for, as opposed to actual critical, deep thinking and learning. Now that we've talked about some of the causes, let's talk about my solution. So the first solution is adopting alternative methods of assessment. So according to the in a study by Journal of the American Educational Studies Association on July 9th of 2021, where they evaluated different types of alternative assessments. And this included things like having students review each other in detail, having teachers observe students do in action and writing their observations, having students get interviewed by teachers regarding the subjects, specifically math and reading, having students present a portfolio or defend their work in public, and then finally, having local professionals come and review their work. The study noted that these alternative assessments were particularly effective because they reflected a lot of the framework we see in society and how we work. It also helped teachers gain a more comprehensive understanding of the skills, knowledge, and practical abilities that students had. The second solution, as talked about before, is encouraging teachers to be more creative with their curriculum. According to the Social Science Journal in 2020, teachers are the tool for reform. Oftentimes we want to implement reform, but if minds and hearts of teachers are not changed, no action can be completed, right? And another aspect of this is that when teachers have more autonomy of their curriculum, they're more likely to be passionate about the ideas that they're teaching about. And I think this is the only way that we can move towards a revolutionized way of assessment, specifically away from standardized testing. So in conclusion, and now that we've talked about the problems associated with standardized testing, including one, that it does not accurately assess students' academic abilities, and two, that it often leads teachers to teach to the test. Secondly, we talked about the causes, and that included influence by big standardized testing companies like College Board, as well as influence by politicians and their rhetoric. And then finally, we talked about solutions, and that included one, introducing alternative assessment methods, and two, encouraging teachers to be more creative with their curriculum. I hope you remember today that students should not be just a number or a metric. We need to treat students as individuals, and that means moving away from standardized testing. Thank you so much for your time.